Arvin, should I stand here, or do I need to stand over here?
Wherever you like.
Okay. The general overview of this talk, we're going to discuss kind of what a perennial is and how you would use it. Because as you might have heard from any other talks that you've gone to, there are some considerations when you're designing a garden that you don't want just all perennials. You want to have a mix of perennials and shrubs and trees and things like that. So basically I want to point out a few of the traits of the perennials so that you can better use them in your garden. And then we're going to be pretty much, for the most of the talk, going over specific examples. So I'll be showing slides of plants. All of these plants are ones that are very reliable and easy to get in this area from nurseries. And they're ones that I've tested out in gardens and I find to be pretty foolproof. They're not all very foolproof. You can overwater a lot of them and do other things wrong. But for the most part, these plants are great beginner plants if you really want to just get your feet wet and planting some natives. And then I'll have some resources. Really good native plant nursery, a really good book I recommend. And I'll also be answering any questions during the talk. I also actually feel more comfortable if I have some dialogue with the audience. So if you have any questions, especially if it has to do with the plant that we're talking about, then please do raise your hand and I'll look for you and hopefully I can answer your question. So now we'll get started. So one of the key traits when you're designing a native plant garden with perennials is that you don't want to have all perennials. They're often very showy and it's very tempting because when you go on a native garden tour or see these photos in books, they have a lot of flowers, they're pretty fast growing. And this garden, when this was taken, was about, I think, 2 years old when this photo was taken. So it's really tempting to just do your whole garden in perennials. But the only problem with that is that the perennials have a nice bloom season, and then they tend to kind of take a break for a while. So it's a really good idea to have a mix of some shrubs and structural plantings, and then have perennials and other things, just a nice mix. And we're not going to get into it too much, but I'll bring it up as I see it, that not having just one of something. So you'll want to repeat that same plant several times in different parts of the garden. So now I'm actually going to just start in with specific plants, and I'll let you know, I'll give you all my little secrets of why I use these certain plants and which areas I think they're good for personally. But you can make any conclusion you like. This plant, Heterotheca San Bruno Mountain, it is a really great plant for tight little areas, and it stays neat without any pruning, or you don't need to deadhead it even. And it actually blooms almost year-round. It's a very versatile plant, and it's just got some great yellow flowers. It gets about 2 to 3 feet wide, and you can cut it back a little bit if it's a little too large for the space. But it's just an excellent plant for little tight areas. It does take full sun, even though in this photo it has some shade.
I was just going to ask, what happens to the flowers when it's done blooming? How does it look?
That's a good question. I have some photos where it'll show it a little bit, but it actually, the flowers, it leaves behind a little kind of fuzzy brown seed pod type thing, which I find to be really interesting. I have had one client think it's a little messy looking, but it still stays in a nice, neat little mound. So what I usually use this for when I'm designing someone's garden is actually I use it around walkways and near the front entrance, because it's not something that's going to ramble into the entrance. It gives you a sense of order in the garden that some people who have some preconceived idea of what native gardens are like, they think there's not a lot of order and things are a little rangy. But this plant actually stays very, very uniform, and I like to use it kind of near the front entry because it just gives you that neat appearance without having to work on making it neat.
So how many plants are there? How big does it get? How wide does it get?
That is probably 4 plants, and it gets about 2 to 3 feet wide. I have a few more photos I'll show. Here's a close-up of it. Just a really cute little plant with a very nice bright green leaf. Very drought tolerant too. You wouldn't even think by looking at it. And I actually threw this in here because here it is with frost on it. And you can see it's still trying to bloom, even with all the frost. And you can kind of see the seed pods. But I like to throw these frost pictures in here because some people wonder if, the native plants, they like the hot conditions, but are they frost-proof? And yes, they are. They're adapted to occasional frost. So a vast majority of them are frost-proof. So they're really great, versatile plants for our climate. And here's another one. I actually like to pair it with things that are purple or blue. It's just a nice color contrast. And this kind of helps segue into another plant that I like to place near the edge of things and where you can view it up close. And that's the Cicericium rocky point, which is blue-eyed grass. And rocky point is a nice short variety of blue-eyed grass. The straight native variety, this is a native cultivar, the straight one gets very, very tall. It's great for meadows. But if you like to have something a little shorter and right next to a walk and complementing your nice tight little mound of Heterotheca, then this is an excellent plant. Just a really nice small plant. It spreads a little bit and it can reseed a little bit, but it will never reseed to the point where it's a problem. Here's another photo of it with large bark. So you can get a sense of scale a little bit. Yes?
What would be the lifespan?
These actually, since they do tend to reseed a little bit, the individual plant probably won't last many, many years, but since it reseeds and spreads, it should last pretty much, I don't want to say forever, but if you properly irrigate, don't over-irrigate it, don't under-irrigate it. It does tend to go a little semi-dormant in summertime, so if you think it's dying, it's probably not. And you'd be surprised once it starts to rain, it'll just bounce right back, and then in spring it'll be beautiful again. So one thing with a lot of native plants is that sometimes when they go into semi-dormancy in late summer, that's their resting period. And you can keep them from going into that by watering them a little bit, but that can also shorten their lifespan to some degree. So there is a little bit of a balance in caring for them, and it's very individual based on each plant is really different in that regard. So, but I don't want to scare you away from any of them. They're very versatile. And this plant is another great, just profuse bloomer that almost non-stop blooming. Verbena de la Mina. It's a Cedros Island verbena. And it actually, some people keep thinking it's lantana when they go on the garden tour. They see it, they just, that flower reminds them of lantana. But it's actually quite different. It can get about 3 to 4 feet wide and tall, kind of a large billowy mass. But it's a great kind of rambling billowy thing. Now this is not one I would put right next to your walkway because it's a little large and billowy, and if you do need to cut it back occasionally, it will look really cut when you do that. So this is a great plant to push away from your walkways and have a small mass of them, and they show well from a distance because they're so bold and colorful and a good size. And they bloom almost non-stop. Here's a photo of it mixed with some other large billowy things. Not all of the plants in this photo are native though, but it does work well in a drought-tolerant garden.
Stephanie?
Yes?
Does it need deadheading?
It doesn't need it, and some people do it if you have just a few plants of it. You can go in there and deadhead a little bit and thin it out a little bit, but you also don't have to. So if you can let it go for a while and then deadhead it, every couple of years or something, but you can really let it go. But it gets quite large sometimes. And it's a little variable in different gardens too. So this is actually one of my favorite native plants, and especially for larger areas. This is Cleveland sage, and we're going to go through a lot of sages actually, because they're really great native perennials. They attract a lot of beneficial insects and hummingbirds, and they have a really nice scent. It's one of those scents when it just starts to rain, you can smell the sage, and it reminds you of California, and just gives you a really nice feeling. So all the sages are really excellent to have in your garden. They just give you, even when the sun hits them and the oils heat up, you can smell it just a little bit. It's a really nice scent. And this one in particular, Salvia clevelandii, can get about 4 to 5 feet wide and tall. However, there are lots of cultivars that are smaller. And usually, I actually like the straight native because it gets so large and it's very, very robust. And I've had success hand watering it in very hot, dry areas. But the cultivars are also very nice. So it has this nice whorl of flowers. Here's a nice big massing of it, actually. So if you have a lot of space, it's a really nice plant to just mass. Yes?
If you have this and it's kind of leggy and not looking all that great, can you cut it way back and will it be happy with that? And when should you do it?
Sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. One of the things you can do is cut it back every year, making sure you're not cutting into anything too woody. And that way it keeps it a little fresh. But if it's really big and woody, it's a little risky to cut it very hard. And we've actually done it. One of the very first gardens I designed and installed had 3 of these, and they were getting very, very woody. The garden's almost 9 years old, and it's just, we took a chance on it, and we cut it very, very hard. And it actually came back beautifully. So you can take a chance on it.
And do that in the fall?
In the very late fall would be probably the best time.
Thank you.
Yeah. And this is a close-up of the flower. It has just really nice for hummingbirds to get in there. Now this is another sage. I have 2 different ones here. This is actually in St. Carlos. And these are 2 ground cover sages. So similar thing, it does have a nice scent on the leaves. But these only get about maybe at most 12 inches tall. And they can get quite wide. The Salvia Bee's Bliss can get about 5 to 6 feet wide, and the Dara's Choice can get about 3 to 5 feet wide. And the Bee's Bliss has a nice gray toned leaf, and I actually combined them here. I alternated the green leaved Dara's Choice with the gray leaved Salvia Bee's Bliss. And these are great ground covers for slopes that you don't want to irrigate a lot, or in your garden to give it a nice flat appearance, but not where someone will be walking through. So they're actually very excellent ground cover plants. It just gives you a nice carpet.
Stephanie?
Yes.
So once established, realistically, how much water do these need?
That's a good question. They don't need a lot. They need a little bit of water and not frequently. And that's a very relative statement because a lot of it has to do with the drainage of your soil and where they're planted. So if they're on a slope like this, they're going to have very good drainage and you're not likely to rot them out. But one thing that often happens is that someone sees them, they're pushing it to the limit a little bit and the leaves start to curl up and they're a little dry. And then they think, oh gee, it's starting to wilt. They just douse it with water. And that's actually not a good thing to do because when it starts to curl, it's going into a drought mode. And it's shutting down its system, and it's not taking up a lot of water. It's kind of shut down. So if you give it a whole lot of water at that point, what it can do is actually just rot out the roots. So you do need to be a little careful with some of these plants in that regard. It's probably a whole other topic, is watering natives. This is not the best example because this parking strip is too small for this plant, and I have to trim it every 2 weeks at this location. So it's kind of an example of how not to use it in terms of placing it in a narrow space, but it's also a testament to how well it can take pruning. So if you do want to prune it to refresh it, you can do that. You can do it on a fairly regular basis. Like we were talking about with the other sage, if you kind of let it go for a while and then you cut hard into it, it's a little risky. But if you do a little bit every year or on a more regular basis, it can usually, it kind of adapts to it. So if you had a wide parking strip, this would be a very good choice. And if people aren't going to walk there a lot, there's a fence right there, so a lot of people don't walk right into there. And here's another photo of Salvia Bee's Bliss. As you can tell, I kind of like this plant. And I think this is in San Carlos also. And just a really pretty plant. It looks good with stone. It looks good contrasted next to green leaf plants, and excellent for slopes. You're not going to be watering it a lot, so it's not going to cause an issue where this rock wall is going to come tumbling down because there's too much water behind it or something, just when you're irrigating. Very excellent plant.
Cool.
And here's another type of sage. Salvia leucophylla is called purple sage, and this one is actually not that low. It's kind of a ground cover sage, but it gets fairly tall. It gets about this tall. So if you have a very large area, it would be considered a ground cover, but in this case, it's kind of a ground cover, but it's also a shrub in some degree. But it does, you'll notice the nice contrast with the green ground cover next to it. The green ground cover, I believe, is a manzanita, which I don't have on my list. I was kind of going for plants that flower, and actually this one is not in, the salvia is not in bloom right now, but I was going for more showy plants because the manzanita does bloom a little bit. But I wanted to point out just the nice contrast when you pick a gray-leaved plant with a nice green-leaved plant. So even when it's not in bloom, you have some interest. This is another photo of Salvia leucophylla in full bloom. So it does put out a nice bloom of flowers, and then otherwise it just kind of is a nice kind of gray-green leaf. But suitable for a large area, maybe not viewed very up close. So you wouldn't want this right next to a front wall. Now this is another type of sage that actually is more of a shrubby sage. It's a white sage, Salvia apiana. And it has a very white leaf, and it's very, very, very pungent. So if you're not a fan of the sage scent, you might want to check it out in a nursery and smell the leaf, because some people absolutely love it, and some people think it's a little too much sage. And you wouldn't want to plant it in your garden if it's a little too much for you. But this is one that the Native Americans use, and actually this is in front of our office, and we've had a couple Native Americans ask us if when we prune it, we can give them the leaves. So now there's a Native American community center that I have this business card for, so every time we prune it, I leave a little pile, and I just call them and leave a message, and someone comes and gets it at the end of the day. So I get to work the next day, and the pile is gone and being used for some kind of like smudge sticks or something, ceremony. So it's a really useful plant in that regard, and it has a lot of cultural history associated with it. But otherwise, it's kind of a fun plant, and I'm experimenting with pinching it back, because it does tend to get kind of leggy, so it can just send up really long, straight things, and then it can kind of flop over a little bit. So what I'm trying to do is pinch it back as it grows to make it a little bushier, but then it still sends out the big, long, kind of slightly pinkish flowers on the stalks. Yeah.
So I have 3 of these in my garden. Last year with the excess rain, the flower stalk was 12 feet high.
Wow.
And I had to tie it back. So.
Wow, I've never heard of them getting that big. So, well, there you go. They're very, they can really do different things in different gardens.
So how big is this one?
This one is about, the flower stalks are reaching probably 4.5 feet right here. And the foliage is probably at about 3 feet. And this is one I've pinched back too, and it doesn't really look that much like I've been pinching it back, but I have been, so I could probably do it more, but it was an experiment. So it's a nice plant from afar. It's another one where you might place it further in the garden because it does show up nicely because it's kind of whitish. So especially if you have a backdrop of dark green shrubs or something that's existing, and you want something to really contrast with it, having a nice white sage in front of it, or a mass of them, would be very effective. And even when the flower stalks go up, that would look great against a really nice dark green backdrop. They do want a lot of sun though, so you probably don't want to try this if you have a part shade situation. They do want to be very dry and in the sun. This is a really excellent native sage if you actually have a kind of a part sun, part shade situation. It can grow in part sun or full sun in some locations. I've seen that, especially if you have a nice bay breeze going on, but they can burn out just a little bit. But this is a great, it's almost a ground cover. It gets, the leaves get about this tall, and then the flower stalks, it gets about this tall. And then every now and then, you get this crazy one that gets really tall. So they're a little variable in the trade when you buy them. But they have really excellent flowers for hummingbirds, and they don't have that classic sage smell when you crush the leaves, but they actually have a really nice fruity scent when you crush the leaves. So it's a very nice plant to have in your garden if you're gardening and you brush it, or it's just a really nice scent. It's a little hard to describe, but it's very pleasing. And what's great about this plant is even when the flowers drop out of the little flower spikes, they actually have that nice kind of almost pinkish tone. So even if you don't deadhead it for a while, it's just got a really pretty spike that lasts for quite a while, even when you don't deadhead it. And that's what's great about native plants is there's so much, you don't need to be out there in the garden constantly tending to them. You can actually let them go through their cycle, leave the seed heads, they have interesting seed pods, birds and things enjoy the seeds. So it's really a nice lazy way of gardening that's very rewarding. Yes?
I have some of that in the creeps underground and it comes up.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, quite a bit.
This particular plant?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does tend to kind of creep up. It's not invasive really,
No.
but it does spread nicely, so it can form a nice little colony. Yeah, if any of you others have personal experience, that's always great. Everyone has a little different experience with the plants, so feel free to chime in.
Would this plant freeze?
No, it's an excellent plant for cooler temperatures. I've never seen it freeze. I do not have a picture of this one in frost, but I do have more.
Stephanie,
Yes.
there's a huge stand of this on San Bruno Mountain,
Oh yeah.
out in the open sun.
Okay.
If anyone wants to see it, they should go on Ken Himes' field trip
Okay.
to see it.
Did everyone hear that? There's a big stand of it at San Bruno Mountain, and it's in full sun. And it sounds like Ken Himes is...
Ken Himes knows where it is,
Okay.
so you need to go on a field trip to see it.
Go on a field trip with Ken Himes, and then you can see this big stand of it. And that's always fun seeing these things in the wild, too. Getting inspiration for your own garden.
So Stephanie?
Yes.
So my plant, the flowers on my plant don't seem to stand up straight like this. They seem to want to drop down.
Yeah.
Do you know why that is the case? Is this just, it's too much shade maybe, not enough sun?
Yeah, that's a good question. They're kind of variable in that sense. I've seen them do that. And at our office, it gets a lot of shade midday, and then it gets an afternoon sun with a cool breeze. And it tends to be a really ideal condition for it. And it does stand up pretty well, but after a while, sometimes just the stalks get kind of heavy. Those are pretty heavy flowers for this little stalk. So over time, it kind of starts to get a little tired, and then it starts to kind of go down. But the fun thing is when it starts to really establish is that you get enough of them that even when it starts to do that, you don't miss it as much, because there are a lot of other ones coming straight up. So that's a great thing. And they're really easy to propagate too. So if you do try this plant and it really starts to take off, they're really easy to just take cuttings and in the nice, cool rainy season to, just put the cuttings in the ground elsewhere or make little pots of cuttings and give them to your friends. So they're actually really easy to propagate. I actually like to do it when I deadhead it. I actually deadhead further down into the leafy green part, and then I cut off the flower, and then I use that piece to propagate. So do it all at the same time. So, free plants. So moving on to another cute little yellow flower thing is the Eriogonum shasta sulfur. It's a sulfur buckwheat. And this particular one is a really nice little mound. And it can get quite wide. But for the most part, I would say it doesn't really get much more than 2 feet wide and maybe about 18 inches tall. And what's great is it has these intense yellow flowers in spring. And then after that, they turn to a very nice coppery brown rust color, which actually is really striking on its own. And sometimes you think, well, gee, I don't think brown flower, dried flowers are that attractive, but you'd be amazed. For some reason, people that see this in my own home garden, I have it right near my front walk, they are just really drawn to it. It's just a really neat coppery rust color, and they're very papery, the leftover flowers, and they're very interesting. So I actually leave those on all the way, as long as I can, about until the first rains of fall, and then they start to kind of crumble with the rain. And then you could deadhead them, or you could just not, because they just crumble with the rain. So nice, lazy gardener plant. And this plant likes a lot of heat. It likes rocky soils. If you have kind of a serpentine, kind of cliff-like area of your garden, you might want to try this plant out. A few more pictures of it. This is in San Mateo. We have it in a little narrow area where it starts to get very narrow in this bed and just kind of spilling over the rocks. It's kind of a nice plant to have near a walkway again, because it's fairly neat and uniform and tidy. And if you like the brown flower effect, it's actually really an interesting seasonal effect. So here's it towards it's just now starting to brown just a little bit in the flowers. So you can kind of see what's to come. And so all those flowers will just turn this nice rusty brown color. It's kind of being enveloped by this Ceanothus.
So it's an early flowering plant then.
Fairly early. We have some that are, let's see, I think they're just, I think they started blooming about a month ago, or 2 months ago. My sense of time's a little, they're right by my front door, I should know.
Well, I mean, to be blooming with Ceanothus, they really need to be blooming in, March and April.
Yeah. Yeah, and then it's starting to fade, so that one, and the seasons are different too with the rainfall and everything. This is an East San Jose, so it gets quite warm out here. So maybe that has something to do with it too. So moving on to Ceanothus. So I'm focusing primarily on ground cover Ceanothus, since this talk about ground covers, because there are a lot of really nice upright shrubs and small tree Ceanothus, but I wanted to focus on my two favorite ground cover Ceanothus. And one of these is Ceanothus Yankee Point, which is not that deer tolerant. My other one that I'm going to show is deer tolerant to some degree. But this one is a really nice, can really spread quite far. It can actually probably get 10 feet wide if you let it. But so it's great for a nice slope or a bigger area, or if you really want to pinch it back a lot, then you can do that. I had this in deer-prone East San Jose for a while, and actually the deer just nibbled the new growth, because the new growth is tender, and it just actually pinched the plants, and then they would branch again. And it was actually a nice little relationship the deer had with it, so it didn't decimate it. But I have seen deer decimate it if they're hungry enough. So if you have really hungry deer, it might not be the best choice. But if you don't, it's a really, really reliable and easy to find native ground cover. And what's best is when it's not blooming, it actually has a really nice dark green shiny leaf. So it's very clean looking and actually quite lush looking because of the shiny green leaf. And you can actually prune these to stay pretty low. If you don't do anything, it could actually get pretty thick and tall in terms of a ground cover. But this particular one, we just keep pruning it low. So if you do it very frequently, meaning maybe 4 times a year, you can keep it actually quite low. So this one's kept to about this high. So not a ground cover to walk on, but really you can keep it kind of low. Yeah.
So is this careful pruning or is it sheer?
This was careful pruning, actually.
Okay.
So this is going in and looking for branches that are kind of heading upwards and taking those back, and just kind of staying on top of it. And over time, you tend to fight it a little too much, and it might start to creep up. So that's something to keep in mind too. That the bigger the area, the taller you can let it get. You could even work on the edges to keep it tapered down. I actually went on a garden tour in the East Bay. I think it was Point Richmond or something, and these people had trained it to go over the edge of the wall, like really like Salvador Dali paintings, you know, they're just like goes over, and I just imagine how much snipping, because it's only this tall and then it went over. It was incredible. It's just a testament to what you could do if you really put that much effort. I wouldn't put that much effort into it. I think, you know, I like to be the lazy native plant gardener, but it was interesting what you can do with staying on top of things. Yeah.
In your previous picture, it shows it mounding. Does it do that naturally? Because
Yeah,
I have one, but it's only 2 years old, and it's pretty close to the ground. It hasn't filled in like that. So
Yeah.
how old is that?
That, I don't know on this photo, but that is probably about 5 or 6 or more years old. So it does, over time, it will start to kind of build upon itself, because it'll then send a shoot kind of on top, over it, and then that one will kind of not get enough sun, and then it'll kind of, it'll creep up over time, unless you do the pruning thing and get creative with it. So here's the one that's a little more deer tolerant. I'm not going to say deer proof because you can find deer that'll eat everything. But this one actually, the reason it's a little more deer tolerant is that the leaves are a little spiky. So if you're shopping for these at native plant nurseries and you go there and you notice a little bit of a spikiness on the leaf, smaller and spikier, those are usually the ones that are a little more deer tolerant versus ones with nice flat, lush new growth like the Yankee Point. Those are the ones that deer like to eat. So this one I find tends to stay a little lower than the Yankee Point. So even if you don't have deer, you might want to consider this one. And there are lots of other cultivars of this one too.
Was that for full sun, part shade, or?
Usually full sun, but if you have a really hot inland area, I'm sure part shade is probably like that.
Thank you.
So this is another type of buckwheat. Now this is rosy buckwheat. And I wanted to point out that if you love this color, it's hard to pick which color you actually get. Because when you order it from the nursery, it's anywhere between a light pink to almost a reddish pink. So when you order, you just don't know what you're going to get. So if you want to try one and you like it and you go buy more, it might not match. So that's just something to keep in mind. Buy it in bloom if you're really picky about the color, or try to buy it if you're going to buy a bunch of them, buy them all at once so you get the same thing. But it's a really great plant because it tends to bloom when some things aren't blooming, a little later in the summer, I find. And it has a pretty long bloom period. This one, it's pretty up against a walk, but actually, I didn't design this one, but I actually like to put it a little further from the walk because it can get a little lanky up close, but the color is just really great. And it works really well with blue foliage grasses as well. It has a really nice contrast with those. I really like to think about what's in the backdrop of the flower heads because they're held a little, you can't really tell, but they're held up above the foliage. So in this photo, they're kind of held up, and I like to think about what's behind them because it really sets off the flowers nicely.
Stephanie,
Yes.
mine don't look like that. So, you know, so I guess I'm trying to figure out what kind of soil condition does it like. I know it needs full sun. What kind of soil condition does it actually? Is it need to be gravelly?
Well,
rocky?
I actually just do, amended compost, even though some people don't want to do a lot of compost with natives, some of them don't like that, but I don't do a whole lot of compost. So that's kind of all I'm doing, but it could also depend on the slight different variety you have and the watering regime.
I mean, my watering regime is non-existent. I don't water anything.
Okay.
But my soil is a lot of clay, right, close to the bay. So I'm wondering if this plant, particularly because it grows on the rocky hillsides, right, when you go on coastal hikes, so I'm wondering if it needs to be rockier soil, if that's the problem.
Yeah. Well, we have it in some heavier soil, but we do irrigate them at least a couple times a week sometimes.
A couple of times a week?
Yeah, sometimes.
Whoa.
Yeah, so, I mean, once a week would be enough, but usually, I don't know how it will perform with, really infrequent watering. So it probably might bloom a little less.
So I think maybe that's the problem. I mean, it's in an area of my garden that I water maybe once a month in the summer. Certainly not twice a week. So,
Yeah,
okay.
yes.
I have that too, and it's growing on the side of the hill in clay, and it never gets watered. But it never looks like that because the deer eat the flowers.
Ah, okay. Well, it's getting
It
its
reseeds
nice.
all over the place. It's great.
Yeah. It's probably a little more long-lived if you don't water it as much.
Um.
And again, it probably doesn't flower as much. So it's kind of a trade-off.
Yeah.
But it sounds like a really nice relationship with the deer there, because if you did water a lot, then it would be decimated and be gone.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a nice, that's kind of the way it should go. I mean, this is an inner city downtown San Jose garden, so I think, yeah, there aren't any deer, and it's right next to vegetable gardens. Probably gets a little runoff too, so it gets a little extra happy there. So this is a seaside daisy, and this is a straight Erythron glaucus. It's not a cultivar. And the straight one has a lot of green leaves compared to flowers, but it's a very nice uniform mass. And so this is kind of a nice plant to have a massing of. You can't walk on it. I think pretty much everything I'm talking about you can't really walk on too much, but this one is, I think I have another photo. Oh, here's it with frost on it, and it's still blooming. So you can see it's okay with frost. So this is at our office garden.
How closely spaced are those?
This whole mass is only 3 plants, and I think they got about 3 feet apart. Yeah, and it just really likes it here. Now the soil in our office garden is very different from most soil for some reason that we work in. It's not really heavy in clay. It's actually kind of loamy. It's actually perfect. Well, I shouldn't say perfect. That's discriminating against other soil, but it's actually like really easy to work with, and it's very forgiving. Where is your office? It's in near downtown San Jose, but it's in the Rose Garden area. It's a little. Things don't get overwatered there. Everything drains really well. So it has really taken off. And it was really root bound when I planted these. They were left over from a job and about in a pot for like 3 years. So they really took off. And another...
So it's next to a dry creek in the previous photo?
Yeah, it is. It's right. We have it right.
So there's a bit of a slope there.
Yeah, there is actually. So there is, a lot of it is bermed in our office garden. So it also has very good drainage from that. It's all on a Native drip system, but it has very, very good drainage. The soil drains well and everything's bermed. So that's something to think about in your garden as well, is creating berms, especially if you have extra soil. It's nice to not get rid of it, because the plants really do like to have that extra slope.
Now this does the glaucus really does like slope, good drainage, right?
Yeah, you can rot them out pretty.
Yeah.
I've seen them rot out. So especially the next cultivar, which is a really popular cultivar, is this Wayne Roderick. And you can tell because it just blooms really profusely. You can't even see the leaves. So it gets a little lanky, but it just blooms a whole lot.
Question here, Stephanie.
Yes.
I have these. They seem to get a little tower like a rosette sticking up where the blooms come out of. Should you cut those off? How should you take care of these things?
Yeah, we do deadhead them. So they're the glaucus. We don't even deadhead. So if you are looking for the lazy gardener approach, the glaucus might be for you.
Okay.
But this one we do, because it towers above the foliage, and it tends to branch after that, and then it's kind of this awkward thing. And so if you deadhead it just below the leaves, so you don't see where you cut, and then when it's done blooming, it's kind of this nice little green leafy thing. I have another photo of it. This is in our office gardens. So this one, yeah, we do deadhead it kind of more formally, get in there and actually cut them all off. And we have the Heterotheca, is the yellow flower in the back, and then back past that is the straight Erythron glaucus.
Does this have the same drainage issues?
Yeah, this one, it's slightly berm breaker, so it does appreciate that. But we've planted it in, we also have it on the, by the sidewalk where it's flatter, and those aren't doing quite as well, but they can survive in that kind of condition. It's just a matter of not overwatering. And then there's a monkey flower. So monkey flower you probably see a lot in clinging to roadside slopes around here and hiking and things like that. And the straight, if you order Mimulus aurantiacus at a nursery, you can get anything from this kind of lighter yellow to very orange. So it's another one where it's a little variable. And they have lots of cultivars with different colors, and I'll show you some of them. But you can get almost any color you like. But the straight one, it's kind of a grab bag. You might get dark orange or light orange or yellow orange or something like that. And monkey flower, in some gardens it can do great in full sun. Some gardens it likes part shade. You don't want to overwater it. You can get it to bloom again if you prune it after the first bloom. So there's a lot of things you can do with it.
Do you have any experience growing that from seed?
I've seen it, yeah, it's reseeded a few times. I haven't done it on purpose, but I've seen it reseed, and then I try to dig up a little.
So it will grow from seed.
Yeah, and one of my favorite things to do actually with, I kind of am a sucker for weird cultivars of monkey flower, so I'll buy them and then I plant one in my garden, and then in winter when I'm not doing a lot in my vegetable boxes, I actually pinch some of the new growth and I just put a bunch of little cuttings in like a corner of my vegetable box, and then now I've got like 10 new plants because it just really loves that loose soil, and it's nice and cool in the rainy season, and I don't even have to do anything. It just kind of roots itself, and then you have more plants. So it does grow quite well from cuttings if you take it from kind of a nice fleshier growth, not too woody. You kind of strip the lower leaves and push it down the soil below the lower leaves that you removed below the soil surface. That'll really help it root. So that's great too if you buy a cultivar, because when it's a cutting, you're getting that true cultivar color, whereas from seed, it's kind of a fun grab bag. You don't know what you're going to get.
Mimulus.
Here's another picture of it, and this is in downtown San Jose, where it actually, this one got about this big, and they can really get that big. But sometimes in your garden, if you like to pinch them back a lot, like I do, I tend to keep them about this big. So, but if you want to let them kind of just do their thing, they're really nice and can get quite big. I wouldn't put it next to a walkway, but you do want to be able to enjoy the flowers. It's not a plant that, if you look at it from 20 feet away, it's not going to look that showy. It's nice to look at it a little closer because it has that interesting flower. And this is one called Trish. So it's just a nice kind of pinkish cultivar with a yellow throat. They do tend to get a lot of dried leaves in the center, or kind of in the older growth towards the end of summer or towards the end of the bloom period, and that's totally normal, so nothing to worry about. If you have it in an area where that kind of thing is not going to be okay, you might not want to choose this for a really prominent location, even though it's really pretty, but it is normal for it to have some kind of older leaves hanging on periodically.
And how much do you prune in the fall?
We just basically pinch them back. Sometimes we do it anywhere as early as August, trying to get a second bloom. Otherwise, maybe in November, we just kind of cut them back a little bit to get them to not be too leggy. Some locations, especially if you put them in part sun, part shade, which they actually do grow nicely in, sometimes they do get a little leggy though. And so pinching them back and cutting them back helps them branch out a little more and have more flowering tips. And this is a white variety that I really like. And I'm sure you can buy it at several places, but for some reason I've always bought this at Native Revival Nursery in Aptos. And it looks really great. I like to use it in part shade. And I don't know if that's just me and white flowers in part shade because they show up better in shade, or if it actually really likes part shade more. My guess is that it actually kind of likes a little more part shade. I always think white flowers are a little more fairer. I don't know, maybe I'm just jumping to a conclusion, but they seem to do better when I plant it in part shape.
What's the grass?
The grass is Lamus Canyon Prince, and that grass can get kind of tall. It's a nice backdrop grass. So that's also a great grass to have behind the rosy buckwheat, the Eriogonum grande rubescens. It's kind of a sharp grass, so if you have small children, you don't want to put it near a walkway because they might try to retrieve a ball and get kind of paper cut arms. So that's the only drawback to that grass. Otherwise, it's a really striking grass.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the name of the grass.
The Lamus Canyon Prince. Yeah, I don't have that on the list. I kind of try not to get too much into grasses on this one.
What's that available in nursery stock container? Gallon can?
Yeah. Yeah. And they grow fairly quickly, so.
They get really big, so we need the space for it too.
Yeah, they can, and we cut this one back every November. So we keep it, and this one gets kind of only a little bit of afternoon sun, so it actually doesn't get a whole lot of sun. I think it would get a lot larger if it was out in the open, getting more sun.
How much do you cut it?
I cut it back to about here.
6 inches?
Yeah, and it just bounces back. This one, yeah, we cut it back every November, and then it bounces back for the garden tour in April. So, and it does, they do tend to creep a little bit and send up. And I think the straight version, so this is Canyon Prince, I think the straight one might do it more. I've never purchased the straight one because I'm afraid of it. It's supposed to really create a thicket. This one does a little bit, and we just pull them out, and it's fine. And this is kind of a large, fast-growing showy perennial. This is Encelia californica. So I have one of our staff, Valerie, standing in to show you how big it was. I don't think she realized I was going to use this for years and different talks. And so, but this one gets, Valerie's actually an inch taller than I am. And so it actually gets pretty big. And it grows that big, and I would say maybe after the first rain at least. So maybe a year and a half. So if you plant it in fall, maybe not the first spring, but the next spring it will be this big. And you can cut it back to like 1 foot, and it'll just do it again next spring. So this one actually that might have shortened its lifespan, so it only lasted about 4 years. And then it got a little weird, a little rangy, so we took it out. So
it does look a little, scrappy by late summer, right?
Yeah, it can. So this is something you would want to put in the back of your garden beds. Really nice, big, full, filling up space. And so it's really great for that. And it's just very cheerful and blooming a lot in summer. But yeah, you wouldn't want to, it won't be your good, reliable plant. You want to plant it back there, but it might start to get a little rangy. So keeping it at a distance is a great thing for that plant, because then you won't notice it. It'll just look kind of green, even if it has some pockets that you start to see in the middle. And Douglas iris. There are lots and lots of different cultivars, but what I just wanted to point out is I find the straight native does a little better in inland gardens. If you have a coastal or bay influence, you can probably get it. A lot of Pacific Coast hybrids do well, or if you have a really great little microclimate in your garden. But for a lot of my clients that have really more rustic gardens without a lot of care, I actually prefer the straight iris, straight Douglas iris. And it's purple, but it can be very variable. So this is one that just got delivered as a very dark purple. And then here's one that's a very light purple. And here's another one that, this has got a mix of some purples, and then I also received a Canyon Snow, which is a white one, which also does really well even though it's white. So if you go to the nursery and you get the straight one, you could get, it's kind of a grab bag unless you purchase it when it's blooming. It's either the light purple or dark purple, or you can go, make sure if you really like the dark, you go when they're blooming and pick them out.
I recommend the Canyon Snow. It's
Yeah.
a spectacular flower, and I have 3 of those, and they're really striking.
Yeah, there's a Canyon Snow on the right there, and it's white. Sometimes has a little yellow in the throat, and it's very reliable and very nice and white. And these are great plants for kind of part shade situations, and they look good next to walkways, which you can tell is kind of where these all. Well, that one's not, but they're really great walkways.
Do you just leave them be, or do you divide them?
If you want, I pretty much leave them be, but if you want to move them around, it's best to divide them every couple of years in late fall. And you know they're going to do really well dividing when you see a lot of really nice, cute new growth at the base. So in late fall, if you see all this really nice short new growth coming up, then you go, okay, wow, these are really doing well. I can divide them and have really good success at it.
Are you supposed to take the heads off after they're all done and dry?
You don't have to, and actually sometimes I've had them reseed a little bit. So not super reliably, but I have some at my house that I don't do anything with, and they actually reseed right around the base of the plant. So I don't take them off. They do sometimes tend to get a little bit of brown foliage in them, which it's not that bad looking, but if you want, you can take it off, but it doesn't pull out easily. So if you want a really clean looking plant and you want to be able to just go in there and pull it out, it's not going to be that easy. You have to cut off the brown things. But I find that they don't really need it. They're just really, they have a little more green to outnumber the brown. And
Actually, the brown ones, if you just yank on them hard, they come off. They come off.
They come.
And what I learned was you can cut them to the ground in December.
Yeah.
And by April, it'll look like it was never cut down.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Okay.
you can just
So
do
you cut them to the ground in December.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great.
And it grows really fast
Yeah.
after that.
Okay.
Winter perennial.
All about timing. Yeah.
But you don't have to because many of the leaves will stay for many years. So.
Yeah, I don't have to. I should try that.
But I think they really like part shade because
Yeah.
the ones I bought 6. The ones in part shade are doing the best and they're kind of expanding in the circle.
Yeah.
You know, the ones that got in more shade or more sun are just, either they're dead or they're not doing really that well.
Yeah. And they're great too under trees that have a little bit of leaf litter because you won't really see the leaf litter and it kind of falls between it and they do like the part shade. So if you have a kind of an understory of trees, it's a great.
I have mine planted around a rock fountain, so they're up. They're kind of in mounds, and those are the ones that grew the fastest and are the healthiest. The ones that are flat on the ground didn't do as well. So it seemed like drainage.
Yeah, drainage again. Yeah. Yeah, they can rot out a little bit. I think if you gave them too much water, but they're pretty versatile though. So yarrow. And yarrow, there are a lot of different yarrows out there, and some of the more common ones that we use, so there's the straight white yarrow, and there's a really neat one that has kind of grayer foliage on the right there, that has a flower that starts out orange and then turns to yellow, and then it fades to kind of a nice just dried seed head, and that one's terracotta. And yarrow is really great too for the birds. They really like the dried seed heads. You do need to be careful. So in this garden, and sometimes it's a little variable from seed. We actually seeded yarrow per the plan for the designer, and the yarrow just really took over. So some of the white yarrows can take over. So if you don't want to have a lot of it, you might want to go with one of the cultivars, and you can get a white cultivar. So. But it's just something to be wary of if you're going online. I think we bought it at Barner Seeds online, and it's great if you really want it to take over. But if you really want to keep it in control, you might want to go with a purchased cultivar.
If you withhold the water life.
Yeah, okay. And this one, I actually included this because this is a little patch in the parking strip at our office that we do not water. And it reseeded itself over here from the other part of the garden, and it was just a straight white one. So it, for some reason, just morphed into this pink. I think it was white in the seed packet. It got white with a little bit of pink in some of them, and then it just did this, which is actually really pretty, and no water at all. And it's a narrow parking strip about that big, so it's a very variable plant. So if you grow it from seed, you don't know what you're going to get. Yes.
If you're getting no water, like how long is it going to look like that?
It'll look like that. It looks like that right now. And it'll probably do for about another month, and then we just cut them down. And I'm actually trying to spread the seeds in the other part of the parking strip, and so far it hasn't.
just turn brown foliage.
No, it will stay actually pretty green. For some reason, these seed-grown ones, I think because they're so vigorous, it will stay green foliage right there, which is pretty amazing for San Jose with no water, in, between the street and the sidewalk, and kind of abused by the public. So, it's kind of
So
a
are you saying it's better to grow from seed?
If you want it to be vigorous, I think seed might be a little better.
Oh, okay.
But if you want one of the nice cultivars and you don't want it to take over your garden, I would recommend actually buying purchasing it at a nursery at a certain cultivar. Just a little more predictable. Yeah.
So just another data point. I think I have a cultivar called Moonshine,
Oh yeah.
and I water it maybe once a month in the summer, and it seems to be, doing fine with that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take over. It stays as a single plant, and its flowers nice white. That when you go out at night, it actually shines back at you. It's actually quite. It is a bit of a moonshine. So.
Yeah. That's nice. Yeah, they have a lot of different colors. They have salmon ones and yellow ones, and a lot of neat colors out there. And this is Penstemon Margarita VOP. It actually stands for back of porch, because some people don't know that, so let's say that. And this one has a really cool flower that has a lot of different colors going on in it. And one of the key things with this one has really small leaves. So if you're looking for something kind of finer texture, it's a good choice. And to contrast with that, there's a cultivar that I've only been using for the last couple of years, Catherine de la Mare. And that one is actually a similar color flower, where the flowers are a little bigger and the leaves are a little bigger, and it's a little lusher looking. And I think it might, so far I don't know, but I'm guessing it might take a little more water, be a little less drought tolerant, but I could be wrong. That's part of it just because it has larger leaves. And we are almost done. I think we have 2 more plants. And so this is California fuchsia, and there are lots and lots of cultivars. Some are tall and reseed like crazy. Some are medium like this one, and they don't reseed very much, if at all. And they're a little more tame. And but what's great about this plant, the best part is that it blooms in late fall when a lot of the other plants are slowing down.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an excellent, excellent plant to have a little year-round color. And hummingbirds really like it. And here's a close-up of the flower. And Calistoga is one of my favorite varieties because it has a really nice broad leaf and it's kind of lush looking. And it gets about 3 feet by 3 feet. And this is an unknown cultivar growing in Emerald Hills. It's kind of a little redder, so you can get a little different color variation. We're trying one at our office that I found in a little nursery in a little north in Fulton, a Cal Flora nursery called Marin Pink, and it's kind of a neat salmony pink color that I've never seen before. So I'm looking forward to that. The first time blooming will be this fall. And this is another variety that's kind of tall and spiky. And I just wanted to show this one. Here's a further away picture. It's really great to have in the foreground with something green in the background. And this one actually gets a little wild. It's actually cropping up in the rock right there. So this one's a little vigorous. It tends to be that the ones that are the taller, spikier ones are a little more vigorous. They can reseed. They do have underground stems. But sometimes that's a welcome thing if you have it in an area.
I thought it was planted that way. It looks nice.
Yeah, I think it just kind of did that.
If you go to Alum Rock Park, by the creek where there are these stone walls,
Oh yeah.
you see the same kind of
Oh yeah.
thing.
So it's a really great plant for that kind of effect. So maybe if you have a dry stack stone wall, plant it right above it and see what happens.
And the hummingbirds really love this.
Yeah.
Yeah, they really attract them.
Yeah. And there is a white variety. It's not as reliable, and it doesn't get that tall, but it's kind of pretty if you want white. And I tend to think it likes a little less sun, and it's kind of a spreader. It only gets about this tall.
Where do you get this one?
I think I got it at Native Revival in Aptos again. I know these strange white varieties down there.
Because there isn't anything else that's white that flowers in the late summer and
Yeah.
fall. So,
It's true. It's a nice
yeah.
thing.
So,
Oh, no, go ahead.
I said soap plant.
Oh.
Oh. If you are lucky enough to catch it.
So, coyote mint, Monardella villosa is our last plant, and it's a really nice, beneficial insect-attracting plant. And this is at our office garden. And I just saw one of these butterflies today out there, actually. And this photo was taken years ago. And so they're really, and that's Achillea terracotta right next to it. And this one does have a pretty long bloom period. It's very sensitive to overwatering, so you do want to be careful about that and give it good drainage. But it has the most amazing blooms. So it's definitely worth trying and trying to get to grow. And it is not frost tender. So, and there are a little bit of flowers out there. So it does require a little bit of deadheading to keep looking neat. But other than that, it's a really excellent.
Doesn't it die and come back?
No, not entirely. You can cut it back, if it's not too woody, you can cut it back pretty hard and get it to come back fresh. We do that about every other year. Every year we deadhead it at least, but sometimes every other I cut it back really hard.
So, Stephanie, so mine unfortunately went into the shade because of a neighbor's podocarpus.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's not flowering anymore. How easily can I move it? Can I just dig it up and move it this fall?
You could try. I haven't tried that.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're definitely
How
not for the shade.
Propagating, can you?
I bet you could propagate the tips. I've tried it and then I kind
Oh.
of got lazy and lost them. But
I'm trying to grow it by seed. I have little plants to see
Okay.
how they survive.
okay, there might be some neat cultivars at the nursery in Fulton. I found one called Russian River that's really a deeper purple. It's really nice. And some resources. So we have a list of plants, and hopefully everyone got one. And then one of my favorite books. I mean, there are a lot of great books out there, but this is probably the most favorite. California Native Plants for the Garden by Carol Bornstein, David Frost, and Bart O'Brien, some really well-known experts in this field. And I would say this is probably, if you're going to buy one book, this would be the absolute best book. It has common cultivars available in this area. It has maintenance tips. It has growing tips. Lots and lots of photos. So this is a very excellent book.
What's the name of that nursery in Aptos?
Native Revival Nursery. So I listed your Verbena because that's kind of the closest to here.
Yeah.
And but Native Revival also has a lot of plants, and they're a little further away, but they also have a demonstration garden, and they have some really nice plants. And then I put my company there, Curtis Horticulture, and we do design, consulting, installation, and maintenance. So we're full service, and feel free to contact me if you have any questions.